Okay, so welcome to lesson 15. Goodness gracious, what fun we have. So yesterday we spoke a little bit about business to business. So the spin model is not necessarily purely for business to business. It is, as Sam said later in the call, it's a good way of sort of seeing, any conversation that you're trying to move into a close. But the spin framework and value selling is a bit more focused on B2B, whereas the AIDA framework is very much focused on B2C. Okay, and you'll be able to see that as we go through the AIDA framework. However, even if you're in B2C, I would still make sure that you are just thinking about value selling and thinking about spin selling. So with the AIDA framework, the AIDA framework's been around for, a long time. I mean, it came out of the kind of 70s, 80s. So there's nothing new about this framework, but it is a good way of basically, understanding how you sort of get attention, interest. And again, it underneath the AIDA framework is this idea of emotional resonance. So it's very much in and around, how do I elicit an emotional response from somebody so that we can move through to buying. Then I'm just going to show some sort of sample scripts, for each of the 4 areas. Then some implementation tips. Then Zavi's going to do AIDA on Zavmo, and then hopefully some of you will have some ideas on AIDA and how you could use AIDA in your businesses. We'd love to hear from you. So as I go through the model, please do jot down any crazy ideas you've got with regards to AIDA in your business, because the crazier and more creative they are, the better. So, there's no bad answers, no wrong answer. It's just sharing it with the group so that we can all begin to understand a bit more about people's different businesses. So first of all, what is the AIDA sales framework? It is very much focused on B2C. But having said that, I think the models that we were talking about yesterday and today's model, you can still get something out of it in a B2B context if that's where you're selling. So basically the AIDA framework covers all the way from interest all the way through to action. So those are what the 2 A's are. So first one is, how do I get attention? And then finally, how do I get them to action so they actually do something? And in a B2B context, I would see this as things like, how do I drive people to a webinar? Do you know what I mean? So you don't need to think of it as action as in selling something, but it's action as in doing something without necessarily having to speak to somebody. So the 4 stages of AIDA, okay, very, very simply, are first, how are you going to grab attention? So in the world of social media, obviously this is not easy because there's loads of people producing really high quality content, which, is really good. So what ideas have you got to grab attention? What ideas have you got that's going to basically allow you to kind of be ahead, of that attention curve? The next thing is, how do you get interest? So yes, you've got to grab attention, but you've actually got to get interest in your product and services, right? So, we can all, get attention, but maybe that attention isn't moving us in the right direction in terms of, getting the sale or getting somebody to sign up to a webinar or whatever it might be. So the second thing is interest. How do you build that engagement? The third area is motivating a desire to actually do something. So again, if you think about even the whole AIDA model, it is very, very focused on human emotions. So how do you get attention? How do you grab interest? How do you create emotional desire? And then finally, the last point is, if you already have people's interest in that process, it'll be very easy to drive the conversion. Okay, but if you don't get them on that emotional journey through the AIDA model, you're never going to get to that point where they're actually going to drive the conversion. So let's just look, and this is where I want your creative brains. Okay, so start jotting down ideas that you might have in your business for this. So how do we grab attention, right? How do we grab attention? Well, we've obviously got compelling headlines, right? So what headline could you utilize in your business in order to, grab attention. Now, it could be, mapping it with current trends. So, did you hear what Donald Trump said about, Zavmo? I mean, you've got their attention. I mean, what you can do with that, I don't know how good that is or bad, but at the end of the day, at least you've got their attention. You could also have striking visuals. So this is really something that I see with growth engineering all the time. Their visuals are really, really striking. You can consistently tell what a growth engineering piece of content is, and people are more likely to open our newsletters because of it. Thought-provoking questions. So this was a great one from Billy, when Billy basically went onto our LinkedIn, and she was like, do you say please and thank you to AI? And that provoked, a load of different questions on AI on our LinkedIn. So again, you can brainstorm this with Claude or whatever AI you're using, but that was one that Billy came up with, and we got a lot of engagement for that. And then you've got surprising statistics. So these are just some of the ones that I've used recently. So I did a surprising statistic on the amount of money that they feel is wasted in learning and development. So it was some ridiculous number, like, in the billions, right? And so obviously people look at that and they go, right, okay, well, let me read the article. So in your world, what attention techniques do you think, you might have for your product and service? The next thing is we need to basically have that value crossover now. So we've got their attention, and now we need our golden why and their values to be coming together to basically create interest. Okay, so here it's going to be things that like sorry, well done. I am such a doofus, really. I mean, okay, here we are. I am so sorry, guys. So am I now sharing? I am literally the biggest doofus ever. So let's just quickly go back. So AIDA is attention, interest, desire, and action. Okay. And then attention techniques are, as I went through, so compelling headlines, striking visuals, provocative questions, and surprising statistics, amongst other things, right? So I don't have all of the answers with regards to how you could get attention. So I want to hear from you guys when I finish my little kind of mini monologue here. Then we're going on to interest generation, and this is where I was. Thank you, Sam, for pointing that out. I really appreciate that. So is it all okay now? Is it everything okay now? Such a doofus. Thank you. So here it is very, very much about your golden why, okay, and their values. So that is where the interest is going to come. So basically it's you sharing the experience, the benefit, engaging stories. So stories about people that have basically been there, done that, and had a wonderful time from the experience with your products and services. It's you demonstrating value. So maybe you going above and beyond, demonstrating value in terms of the impact of the solution, maybe, and basically how you have addressed pain points. So, we've been working with XYZ for the last, prior to working, with us, they had the following problem, but now, they haven't. So that interest generation, you want to go a bit deeper, right? So this is the point where the brain is going from, you've got my attention, to I'm going to start concentrating on what you're saying. So this is often a little bit harder depending on the synergy between the attention technique and the interest technique. Okay, so what you want to try and do is make sure that there is synergy there, right? So going back to my example about Donald Trump, and Zavmo, you might struggle then to basically move it over to interest. So we might say something like, did you know that Donald Trump is dyslexic? I don't know if he is, I'm just making it up. And he would have really, liked the idea of a personal tutor or something. But you get my logic here. It's meant to be like a natural flow through from one stage to the other. So then we're on desire creation. Okay, so after you've basically piqued their interest, you then need to create the motivation and the emotion in them to actually want to do something. Because remember, we are all emotional creatures. We think with our heart. How is this going to basically make my world a better place, basically, at this point? So it's very much about painting vivid pictures of what it will feel like to be the other side of this journey. So can you imagine, if you did come into the growth engineering world of high levels of engagement and gamification, what would your company culture think, feel like, once everybody was happy and focused on their education? So this desire creation is very much like just something that happens before they decide to buy. So unless they are really, really clear on what it feels like to be part of that world, they're going to struggle to make that connection. Okay. So here it really is about using things like social proof, using things like unique things that you can do and have done with similar types of people as they are, in order to drive that conversion. And here as well, you want to be driving that emotional connection rather than that logical connection, because they're just about to take the leap into, right, okay, I'm going to basically make the decision to purchase. So what you want to do in each of those stages is take them on a journey and make sure that that journey has clear calls to action. So you see this a lot in web pages at the moment, where it's just one long big scroll. And as you go down the web page, you're basically moving from attention to interest to desire to basically a call to action. And so you want to make sure that it flows, and there's a logic to how each stage finishes and how the next stage sort of starts. If you possibly can, you want to have a sense of urgency, but only if it aligns with your brand. Okay, so there are lots of brands that try and kind of force a sense of urgency into something that there just doesn't need to be a sense of urgency, because it's not price sensitive, right? So if your product and service is not price sensitive, don't basically put a sense of urgency which is in and around price. Because it'll just sort of slightly dampen your brand. So do be careful when you use price as a sense of urgency. However, obviously, price as a sense of urgency is good, but not in all cases. So you just need to be a little bit careful of that. So it'll be interesting to hear whether you think price could be a sense of urgency for your customers or whether it's not. The other thing is short-term promotions, or things that have, a timeline on them. So, this is basically when we start the course, this is when we finish, and, this is basically the fact on the ground. So that's another sort of area of acting in a sense of urgency. If you don't have these action triggers, people can kind of start having this kind of emotional attachment to your brand and what you're doing, but ultimately it might not drive the behavior you want. So these action triggers are a really important part of sealing off, that stage that you are in the kind of AIDA framework. Then the other thing that you want to do is, if it is a new product or if it's a high value product, you want to make sure that you're talking about risk reduction, and how you do that is typically through case studies. So you don't really want to do money back guarantees. You really want to make sure your product is robust enough not to basically have to do that. The other thing is you want to do with risk reduction is make sure the timeline for any trial you give is as small as it possibly can be, because the longer the trial doesn't mean to say the more they're going to play with it and fall in love with it. It just means the longer they've got to forget about you. So what is generally happening out there with free trials, now, if it is a free, is they're 3-day trials. And so, either you're using it that day and you like it and you're not phased that you're going to cancel it, or basically, that trial has just disappeared. So, in terms of risk reduction, don't think longer free trials are a way of getting more people, because often it just doesn't really work like that, because there's no sense of urgency, and because there's no sense of urgency, they don't actually do anything about it. And then the other thing that you need to do is really make sure that the next steps are as obvious as possible, right? So I know that this is made easy from, WooCommerce and a lot of the plugins that you can have to your WordPress website, but you do need to make sure that, they're almost tripping over themselves to basically know how they're going to buy your products and services. So those are kind of some of the action triggers. There's obviously other action triggers, that you can incorporate, and I would love to hear what they are with regards to your business. So just some ideas of simple scripts you can do. And again, what I would do is I would take your golden why, I take your 4 Ps, I take the AIDA framework, I'd throw it into ChatGPT and see if it comes up with some creative scripts and ideas for you. But, you know, the types of questions that, you know, it should come back with are things like, you know, for A, in terms of attention, it's, you know, did you know that 80% of people struggle with dyslexia, neurodiversity, da, 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 da. So you're immediately going, oh, well, you know, I definitely know somebody who's got that particular, you know, neurodiversity thing that they struggle with. So immediately you can see it's a question, and, you know, it might spark attention. And then in terms of I, it might be something like interest. So, okay, so I now know that, you know, lots of people struggle from this particular affliction that I have, but by using this products and services, we have helped this amount of many people move past, you know, that particular challenge, right? So that's more of a statement. And then D, in order to sort of develop desire, here is where you're basically showing, you know, speed of action. You're trying to get speed of action from the purchaser. So basically, did you know that customers report, you know, 50% X improvement in XYZ? And so they're thinking, my God, I really do need to get on and do something about this, right? So you've now got that emotional hook, and you're ready for A, which is start your free trial today, right? So I think what's really interesting to me about the AIDA framework is it is even more in and around driving activity with emotional hooks. So really do think about how you ensure that your 4 Ps, your golden why, your 4 Ps, and how you're using the AIDA framework, you know, link seamlessly together in order to drive emotional resonance. So what we're really about here, and what the AIDA framework is, works best is when we are driving that emotional resonance through the AIDA framework. So facts just don't land, you know, as emotionally as, you know, emotions do. So really just try and tie in what you think your customer values are and what you've done with the work that you've done on your golden why into the scripts. And it's worth actually looking at your scripts in terms of emotional hierarchy. So looking at the scripts and then making some decisions with regards which packs the biggest punch, because the ones with the most emotional resonance should drive the highest conversions. But yeah, you'll have to play around with it and see. So again, you know, in terms of sort of implementation tips here, not all messages are right for all people and not all channels, right? So, you know, do think about whether you've got, you know, the right things, that you're using the right script for what audience. So it's not like a one size fits all. However, what you might do is you might do some A/B testing. So you might go, right, one size fits all on, let's say, Instagram and TikTok. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to see which audience resonates better and what conversion rates I get. And so tweak the message accordingly, right? So do customize it for your audience and do you know, A/B testing. The critical thing here is you've got to measure response rate. So, you know, I just threw out a comment there, which was the more emotional resonance you can get into the script, the more likely it is to, you know, push somebody over to convert. But, you know, maybe you'll prove me wrong on that. But the only way you're going to find out is basically if you measure response rates. So do measure response rates and tinker, you know, your messaging accordingly. And then the other thing is that you've got to refine continuously, right? So going back to the beginning of the AIDA model, attention, right? If you keep pushing out the same stuff in exactly the same way, you will cease to get their attention again, okay? So you might have the message right, but you might have to tweak it, you know, every single time in order to basically grab that attention. So just be cognizant of that. You want to have a brand that is cohesive. You want to have a voice which is cohesive, but by the same token, you can't be using the same text and the same images and the same, all of that, you know, the same time, because you won't be able to get attention. So if you think about the way the brain works, first of all, you have to get attention. Then you have to fill in the details, right? And that's basically when the interest piece kicks in. So attention is obviously vitally important, but if then the content and the journey that you're taking them on fails to achieve that level of concentration, so they don't hit the purchase button or sign me up or whatever, yes, I want to come to the webinar, ultimately, you know, that concentration has been broken and you have to go right back to the beginning, getting their attention again. Okay, so Xavi has put together, he actually did a really robust presentation, and I've sort of scaled it down a bit. So he went into a lot of detail, but I've sort of scaled it down a little bit for him. And so he's going to go through the scaled down version, not the full fat version that he was working on so diligently. So Xavi, if you could take the key points out. Are you okay if I drive, or do you want me to hand over the...
No, you can just put it up on here if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. So yeah, just give me a thumbs up or give me a that way for the next slide. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So for AIDA, in terms of the attention stage, I got creating posts which are more focused on going viral and bringing in more traffic to the page. So probably less educational, but key at the earlier stage of the business just to get more traffic. So hopping on skits, trends, and staying super consistent with it. Creating videos that bring in new traffic. So something that's maybe different, just to like push the videos into spaces where probably we wouldn't normally be. And then for interest stage, I got more posting more detailed studies, so showing how Zavmo's helped, how the 4D strategy differentiates us compared to other people in the edtech space. And as well as that, doing weekly questionnaires on social media. So on Instagram and stuff, you can, you know, drop a question box, and then anybody that sees it can drop questions just to build a little bit of community. And what else? Yeah, create hashtags, so study buddy AI, personalized learning, and just being super consistent with the hashtags to try and bring together more community, and be a little bit more educational with the content, and just try and build engagement as much as possible, as well as addressing pain points. So kind of bringing it back and maybe giving like real life examples of how it's helped in like maybe for neurodivergent learners, and generate as much interest as possible. Do demonstrations of how personalized learning is different compared to regular tutors. And then for desire stage, it's key to create emotional connection. So lock into our USP and really push the fact that we are different, as well as showing the human side of what we do. So why we do it and what we're super passionate about. So maybe stories from people within the team that are neurodivergent and why they feel so passionate about it, kind of pulling on those emotional strings. And then next, emphasize, so also in the desire stage, we're going to really emphasize that we're breaking away from traditional education models and highlighting the ability to understand each learner's need to be pinpoint to you and your educational experience. And then finally, the action stage. So we've got partnership programs enrolled for maybe influences that a lot of the younger generation will see. Free trials, so 3 days to 7 days free trials, just to get people out there and originally just get the users flow to start. Special pricing for early adapters, which kind of falls into like the 7-day free trial, and then refer a friend type thing to almost get like a credit. And then just creating a clear plan of action. So like maybe it's a limited time offer, or showing case studies of people and their experiences with Zavmo, and then posting these on social media to show people that other people have joined and it's helped them, or just what their experience has been in general. Given facts about and statistics of, you know, how users have found the product. So yeah, that was it really.
Fantastic. Okay. So what does the audience think of that? Would you be interested using that AIDA model for our how's he done? How's the Avmo been moved through the AIDA model?
I have a question for you. Do you measure results of each and every step? So let's put it like, you started with a $1 revenue and you are now at 100,000 or 2,000 or two. It doesn't matter, whatever the growth number is. But can you measure the growth?
Yeah. So on all the social medias, I think the main ones that I was wanting to push out on would be Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat, and all of them have business analytics. So what I would do is I would look at trends at the moment, post them, look at the analytics, and see what's working and what's not working. But I think in the beginning, would want to try and push it more organic for especially Instagram and TikTok. Whereas Snapchat is not really something you can push as a business organically. So that would be more like a set ads and then just, putting a couple £100 in it every month or something like that.
Oh, Gerald, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yes, I think you're doing the right things, but I'm just curious to look at the numbers and say, okay, do we have more registrations? Do we have more dollars? So because that at the end of the day is the real goal.
Yeah.
I mean, because we haven't launched yet, one of the things that I'm thinking about is if we're charging, let's say, £55 a month. So Xavi, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know how much a tutor is in London, but I think it's about £60 an hour or something. So if we're charging 55 a month, and then we're putting together bundles, and then we're putting together trials, and then let's say we've got a budget of £500 a month for, driving traffic. I don't know what would be. I mean, I would have thought we maybe trial that for a period of, I don't know, 6 months and then see what happens. But we would hope some.
Yeah, it's early stages, so I'm just curious to how that goes. You do a lot of work, you do a lot of great work, and then at the end of the day, you want to see the numbers coming in to make it worth and to do the stuff that you can do paid for as well.
Yeah, and Jared, I think there's a really good point that you're kind of making there, the difference between B2C and B2B. So once you've developed those relationships in B2B, they are there to be sold into. Whereas B2C, it's almost like it's obviously we're going to try and do as much referral as possible, but it's kind of high risk because B2C, you don't know who your customers are. You've got the whole world. Whereas, I know we've probably got 300 organizations in the world we want to work with, and we've worked with, probably 100 of those. So it's a lot easier to make sure that we've got revenue. But this is a product that, I think we all felt was like something that we wanted to offer to the consumer as a whole. It's just, we've never done it before.
No, it's quite difficult. I've been working for publishers, and they are focused on consumers. And that's I would call it positively a nightmare, because you can see everything. It's exciting, it's different, and all the things you were thinking of didn't work, and the other things you didn't think of do work, and which is really great. It's excitement. That's why I'm curious to know if what you do leads into revenue, and that's nothing wrong or right, but it's really difficult.
Yeah. I agree. I think consumer is really difficult, and often it does, require, a lot of investment over a long period of time, unless you've got something like a physical location or you've got something where you can drive people to.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. If you could somewhere here or there in some stadium kind of set up an event where people come to and experience exactly what you all just said. That is excitement, but that is first of all local, secondly costing money, so that's always that start of the game thing that makes it difficult. But if you're a bit further down that path, you can come up with really exciting stuff.
Yeah. It's just a question of getting I
Yeah.
mean, so Roy, you must be in a similar sort of situation, right? I mean, in terms of, trying to make a consumer brand out of nothing.
Sorry, lost the button there. Yeah, I think just trying to figure out the starting point for me on all of that and figuring out what's going to work. And also just because I think the big consideration for me is wanting to, because alcohol is so difficult in terms of expansion of sales because of excise duties, we can't just have an e-commerce business in the same way that you would if you were selling t-shirts. So trying to figure out how to build your global audience, because ultimately, hopefully we'll have a great basis of sales within Andorra, but we're quite aware that Andorra theoretically is not where we're going to make our huge gains. Where the company will become really profitable is the minute we are able to tap into much bigger markets outside of Andorra. But at what point do you start kind of marketing and trying to capture those audiences through the hashtags and build that desire for our products when you're not yet available in that country or in that market, and it's really complicated to ship there until you have a distributor or all these things in place. So I think that's one thing that I'm quite aware of and especially if it comes to kind of paid ads, using that money wisely, or because my partner's a DOP, which is a fancy word for a lighting cameraman, basically, and I'm a TV director. So we're lucky that we've worked with a lot of people over the years, and they've been very kind, kind of TV presenters or whatever, have offered to do posts for us the minute we're ready. But it's kind of figuring out when to pull in those favors, because there's no point a TV presenter, doing a lovely post for us in the UK if we're not available in the UK. So I think that's a kind of big consideration for us in particular, with this product that's really tricky because of the tax situation, is how to build a social media thing that kind of does it in stages geographically, if that makes sense.
I mean, one piece of advice I got, and I can't remember who it was from, this was a while ago, we were thinking about how we grow the business outside the sales resource we currently have in growth engineering. And somebody said to me, well, you're not ready to have distributors until distributors knock on your door. And that the reason I thought about that was sometimes I think if you start off driving a brand in the smallest possible sort of segment, but make it really, really exclusive, by word of mouth, people might reach out to you and say, hey, how do I get involved, even though I'm a different country? So rather than thinking you've got to boil the ocean, if you basically just boil a teacup, you might find that gets more interest, and then people flock to what you're doing, rather than even sort of thinking about and Julie, I was like, well, I'm not 100% sure I believe in that, so let's go out to all the distributors all over the world with a mailing campaign saying, hey, do you want to resell us? And Julie, nothing happened. And we did actually have a reseller manager within growth engineering for a long time. But if the brand doesn't have a big enough pull, it's really, really difficult to get it. So it's almost like you need, going back to that, in my view, and other people may have, Gerard, you may have, or anyone on the call may have other ideas, but I definitely did find that resellers, resellers that work will come to you off the back of what they what they've seen you do when your brand. But to try and go too early into that is problematic, because you just end up spending a lot of time and money and resource. If you could get, let's say, 50% of all restaurants in Andorra to have, to stock the gin, or then I'm sure by the time you got that, the pull would come from the surrounding areas.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting kind of flip side between, when it comes to the international thing, between you just got to stay true to the values of the company and what you're trying to build, I suppose. And then there might be some people who on Instagram, even though they can't, you're not available to them to try yet, are just kind of interested in following you for the sake of just liking what you're doing environmentally, or for the other things, or they just like the look of your visuals, like if you do really, you know, stunning imagery or whatever. And I suppose there's just like a fine line between frustration at the product not yet being available in their market, or building anticipation of it eventually being available in the market. And it's trying to kind of make sure that you're fishing in the right way to kind of keep them interested, even though they can't taste it yet. So I'm hoping there'll be a kind of fruit of the forbidden, that it's not not available yet. But how we do that, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think also the other thing that I find fascinating about, you know, so building a company is just generally how long it takes. So, you know, you sort of hear these things, overnight success and da 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 da. But the reality is for most businesses, it is a labor of love. You know, it's one of those things that does take an awful long time. I think for the first time we got an inbound lead to growth engineering was about 5 years after we'd started. So before that, it was literally just smashing the phones. You know, it was painful and horrible, but it took us that long to basically get to the point where we got inbound leads. You know, it was very like, you know, guts and braces, and literally just, you know, because that's the only thing you've got. You don't have any money to put into anything. The only thing you can do is basically just dial up people who aren't interested in hearing about you, you know, and send them emails they're probably not interested in getting. But because it's the cheapest form of kind of marketing, it's kind of the only thing that you could do. But I can remember that, you know, the cheer in the office at that point, we were about 7 people, I think. And then it was like, I've got an inbound lead. This is absolutely incredible. But yeah, again, you know, we bootstrapped. So if you do have more, you know, money to spend, then obviously there's a way of doing it. But again, I think it's all about, you know, moving out from that golden nugget. So, you know, you get one client in Andorra, you get testimonials, you make that work. From that, you go to the next restaurant down the road and say, hey, do you want it? And then, you know, out of Andorra La Vella into Encamp, into wherever it might be, I don't know. That would be the way I would do it on a shoestring. But, you know, lots of businesses don't need to do it on a shoestring. You know, they do have investment. And I guess it's, you know, you talking to your investors, potential investors, and saying, where do you want the money to be spent, you know?
Yeah, I think we're kind of lucky just being first on the scene in Andorra. I think is a, you know, that's such a huge part of it, because we've had businesses who haven't even tasted the product yet, and they've already said that they want to stock us. So I think that's, you know, we're really kind of lucky in that sense. And I went to school with a couple of friends who just so happened to have in Andorra, who are now have restaurants, and are some of the top chefs in Andorra, or friends who own L'Oveja Negra, and these kind of places that are considered at the forefront of the gastronomy and the hotel scene in Andorra. So we're going to have our launch party at L'Oveja Negra, and they already have like a huge following. So I think from, you know, Xavi's tips of how to kind of build into those hashtags and that first stage of you know, building an audience, I think, you know, slightly riding on the coattails of our amazing friends and their following, you know, utilizing that. So Alex Kinsella, who owns the Cor de Popeire in Soleu, he is now a, you know, considered to be one of Andorra's top chefs. He was invited to the Big Taste Festival. I don't know if you guys know, but it's a high gathering of high altitude chefs from around the world, some of whom are Michelin star winners. And it's been held in Andorra for the last few years. And Alex was invited to kind of talk and represent Andorra at it this year. So I think he's going to be, and his huge passion is what in Andorra we call kilometer zero food, so local sustainable, you know, produce. So he's going to be immediately going to be one of our brand advocates. So I think, you know, maybe implementing those early on so that he is a voice of trust in the food community, and L'Oveja is very much you know, people look to them as kind of trend setting within Andorra in the hotel scene. So hopefully, yeah, slightly riding on their coat, stealing their Instagram following.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think it's an excellent way to go. I mean, I think it's, you know, I mean, why wouldn't you if you had the opportunity to do that? I mean, it sounds like, you know, the perfect way to go. Harry, have you got any comments?
I don't on that specifically. I was thinking of an example of the AIDA model for us, if that's
Right.
of interest. Okay, so I started by thinking about, so we've got a relatively new feature called Knowledge Showdowns, which is an add-on to our LMS, which is effectively boils down to being learner versus learner quiz showdowns, where two learners face off against each other and answer a series of quiz questions. And I was thinking it would be fun to link that to a major sporting event. I was thinking probably the biggest one would be the Super Bowl. So I would think a good idea, or maybe a good idea, would be to do the teasing and the promotional work in the run up to the Super Bowl, so you could link it to that. So at the attention stage, I was thinking more of teasers rather than directly coming out and saying exactly what it is. So something along the lines of the learning Super Bowl is here, and we could tease it on the socials. We could do little teaser trailers and do countdown graphics and graphics that has like sporting imagery in it, so maybe like team jerseys or stadiums or leaderboards and things like that. So I think that's what we'll do at the attention stage. Then at the interest stage, I was thinking a webinar, and I was thinking we could position it as the Super Bowl halftime show. So we wouldn't actually have it at halftime, because I think people's eyeballs would be elsewhere at that stage, but it's just a little bit of like feeding into the theme of the promotional campaign. So a halftime show where you can see knowledge contests in action and hopefully drive some interest. And then moving through to the desire stage, still trying to link it to the Super Bowl. I was thinking we'd want to have a case study at this stage, and we could position it as the like punditry that comes after the Super Bowl, where it's like the experts talking about how the show went. So something along the lines of winning with knowledge, how company name, whoever the company is, scored big with knowledge contests. So talking through the case study there, which with whatever company name we're able to use. And then finally, action stage, some kind of CTA linking through to either a demo or a free trial, and still trying to incorporate some Super Bowl terminology. So something like kick off your learning or something along those lines. That's where I got to with that, just thinking on this call and writing down some notes. I think it'd be fun to tie it to something that's happening in the real world, something that's front of mind, and try and pull that through the whole campaign so it's consistent, I think, for each of those different stages. That's where I got to.
We can tell you're in marketing, can't we? Eh? That was really good. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, it's great what you share, Harry. I have a story, but that is so different sort of a company that I have than what we are talking about, because all the stuff you're talking about, no, apart from Soraya, you're creating something that you can hold and drink. Technology is something behind the screen.
Yes.
I have been setting up a company like 15 years ago, focused on wood for the fireplace. I come from neuroscience and data science, so a totally unknown, different world for myself. So I did everything wrong. I started up with a great website. People that look for wood don't read. I had to learn that. Exactly what you said, Juliet. I had to learn it. So what I ended up with is figuring out in local settings that it might be a nice day out in the wood if you come with me to cut some wood. Funny enough, that did work. What I didn't know, it's not fair. What you don't expect is that people don't have the muscles to lift a piece of wood. So all of a sudden, you're either with mommy and her two little kids because they like it and it doesn't rain. Not the right way to go. So I changed that, and from that moment on, I got like boys and girls, and that is has nothing to do with age, has to do with the inner feeling. Go out, do wild, get into the wood, kill a tree, and take it home. So, and that has been bringing me now. Today, I got like 30 people there working,
Wow.
certified, European certified pellers and cutters and all that stuff. And I didn't stop doing this, think local, think you and me, and then advertise. And that's not advertise, go to a local newspaper, like you said in one of your presentations, Juliet. These people are hungry for information.
Mhm.
So we always tell the story of the tree that onto your car. And with a little help of today's technology, you can have nice pictures of the one that did fall on a car. So, and that pulls people. We bring them in to a certain place. There we have a ugly before World War II truck where they need to climb in as part of the emotion. And like 110% of them order after that. And that is
Wow.
getting back to all the things we talked about: emotion, get the feel, get the connection. And the horrible thing has been, and that took money or years, depends on how you look at this, is getting to the moment that we discovered that a great website didn't work. After the fact, it did work. The minute they got their first thing, then they started to go back and, hey, isn't there anything that happened last week, or what have you? So it was the other way around. Instead of getting into the socials, we got out of the socials, and now we are back in, and then it's this community feel. And then all of a sudden, it's Rosie that tells to her sister, "Hey, these are great guys, big fun, big fun. You should go there." And that is a different story, because it's a different market, it's a different product, but it goes along the lines that you share with us. And I can tell you, if you guys ever want to have an exciting moment, I invite you on my, horrible Jeep Wrangler, ugly beast. We go into the woods, smash a tree, go back home, have a drink, and we come get your gin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That is how
that's a
it
great.
goes. That's the whole program. Get in, get dirty, sweat, drink, and eat. That's what we do for pulling customers.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because it does come back to that whole kind of referral thing.
Yeah.
So from the absolute get-go, first point of touch you've got, ensuring that your goals, why, your values all align,
Yeah.
and then they're automatically taken on this emotional journey where they're then passionate advocates, and your example where Rosie was going to tell all her friends, and then, because Rosie's really popular, suddenly Soraya's going to have loads of people drinking her gin. No. Yay. Yeah. Yeah, Steve, love to hear from you.
I don't know if you're familiar with it, Soraya, but because you're a local, maybe not, but there is an Andorra Facebook group, which is Andorra. I don't know whether you're familiar with it, but there's 6.7 thousand members on there. And on a Thursday, you can advertise local businesses. So you can't do it every day, otherwise you'll be binned from the group. But on a Thursday, as long as it's an Andorran local business, you can advertise on a Thursday. And, that's a fairly big group of 6,700 people that might be worth. I don't know whether you're familiar with it anyway, but I just thought I'd mention in case you weren't.
The Andorra Expats group, is that the one that you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of people on there who aren't in Andorra. It's just people who like Andorra who are worldwide from the questions that are in there. But yeah, thank you. That's definitely, when we're ready to kind of get people through the doors, I'll definitely use that. And actually, that's how I started getting the Instagram following, was by announcing that we were doing this thing in that Andorra Expats group. So yeah, that's a great idea, and I'll definitely use that for resources, I think.
Great. Okay. Well, has anybody else got anything they want to share? If not, we'll wrap up early since it's Friday. You know, everyone's got that Friday feeling. Next week is all about automation, and Cosmo is actually going to do one of the sessions, which I am very much looking forward to. Yeah, I think Amal is also doing a session before we close. So yeah, we're bringing in the course with a strong ending, I think. So yeah, thank you very much for attending this week. It's been lovely to see your faces. Thank you very much for your interactivity, and I wish you a fantastic weekend and look forward to seeing you on Monday.
Thank you.
Well, see you
All
next
right.
week.
Bye.
Bye.